There's a storm brewing in the Western Conference that could completely reshape the championship landscape, and the Lakers are right in the middle of it. Welcome back to Lakers News Fan Report, your home for the most comprehensive coverage, breaking updates, and insider analysis on our beloved Los Angeles Lakers. I'm here to bring you something that's been developing behind the scenes, something that could be the difference between another early playoff exit and banner number 18 hanging in the rafters. Stay locked in because what I'm about to break down will have you rethinking everything you thought you knew about this Lakers team and where we're headed. Let me start with a reality check that every single one of us needs to hear. We're sitting at 17 wins and 6 losses. That's an impressive record by any standard. LeBron is defying Father Time once again. Anthony Davis is playing at an MVP level. Austin Reeves has emerged as a legitimate third star. Luka Doncic is orchestrating our offense with precision and creativity that we haven't seen in years. On paper, we look like a juggernaut. We're scoring at will, putting up points in bunches, and making highlight reels every single night. But here's the uncomfortable truth that's keeping Rob Pelinka up at night, and should concern every Lakers fan who's serious about winning another championship. We cannot stop anybody. I'm not being dramatic. I'm not being a pessimist. I'm looking at the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. Despite our 17-6 record, despite all the offensive firepower, despite having 2 of the best players in the world, we rank 20th in defensive efficiency. 20th. Let that sink in for a moment. Championship teams don't rank 20th in defense. Championship teams don't give up easy buckets possession after possession. Championship teams don't watch opponents shoot wide-open threes because nobody can stay in front of their man. And yet, here we are, winning games on the strength of our offense while our defense resembles a turnstile at rush hour. Now, before some of you start typing angry comments about how we're winning games, and I should be happy, let me be crystal clear about something. I am thrilled with our record. I love watching this team play, but I also understand basketball well enough to know that what works in December won't work in June. The playoffs are a completely different animal. The intensity ratchets up. The game slows down. Possessions become precious. And teams that can't defend get exposed mercilessly. We've seen it happen time and time again. High-powered offensive teams that cruise through the regular season hit a brick wall in the playoffs because they can't get stops when it matters most. Think back to our recent playoff disappointments. Think about the possessions where we desperately needed a stop and couldn't get one. Think about the opposing players who had career nights against us because we simply didn't have the personnel to slow them down. Think about how frustrating it's been watching teams attack us relentlessly, knowing we don't have that lockdown defender who can take away their best option and force them into uncomfortable situations. That's the reality we're living in right now, and it's a reality that needs to change if we're serious about competing for a championship. So here's where things get interesting. Rob Pelinka isn't sitting idle. He's not content with just winning regular season games and hoping for the best come playoff time. He's working the phones, exploring options, having conversations with teams around the league about how we can address our biggest weakness without sacrificing the offensive chemistry that's made us so dangerous. And according to multiple sources around the league, there's one name that keeps coming up in those conversations. One player who represents the exact profile we need. One defender who could transform our entire identity and turn us from a good team into a legitimate championship contender. But before I reveal who that player is, let me paint you a picture of what our ideal acquisition would look like. We need somebody who can guard multiple positions. We need somebody who has the size and length to bother elite scorers. We need somebody who doesn't need the ball in their hands to be effective, who can fit seamlessly into our offensive system without demanding touches or disrupting the flow. We need somebody who's young enough to grow with this core, but experienced enough to contribute immediately. We need somebody on a team-friendly contract that won't cripple our future flexibility. And most importantly, we need somebody who has that dog mentality, that competitive fire, that willingness to do the dirty work that doesn't show up in the box score but makes all the difference in winning basketball games. Now, finding a player who checks all those boxes is incredibly difficult. Elite two-way wings don't grow on trees. Teams that have them guard them jealously and rarely make them available. But here's where the basketball gods might be smiling on us, because there's a team in the Western Conference that's in complete freefall right now. A team that started the season with playoff aspirations and has instead become one of the worst teams in the entire league. A team that's 3-20, that's lost all hope of competing this season, and that's starting to have serious conversations about their future direction. A team that doesn't even own their own first-round pick in the upcoming draft and desperately needs to accumulate assets to rebuild properly. I'm talking about the New Orleans Pelicans, and they're in crisis mode. Injuries have decimated their roster. Their star players have missed significant time. Their chemistry has evaporated. Their season is effectively over before Christmas. And when a team finds itself in that position, when the present is lost and the future becomes the only thing that matters, they start making difficult decisions about their roster. They start listening to offers on players they previously considered untouchable. They start weighing the value of keeping their core together against the value of acquiring draft capital and young assets that can help them rebuild the right way. According to insider reports that have been circulating around the league, the Pelicans are now showing a willingness to discuss trades involving some of their best players, not because they don't value those players, not because they think those players aren't talented, but because they recognize the reality of their situation and understand that sometimes you have to take a step back to eventually take 2 steps forward. They need draft picks. They need young prospects. They need to restock their asset cupboard and position themselves for long-term success rather than clinging to a core that clearly isn't working in its current construction. And here's where it gets really interesting for us. Among the players the Pelicans are reportedly willing to discuss in trade scenarios is a 26-year-old wing defender who's been one of the most underrated players in the entire league. A player who made the all-defensive team. A player who averages 1.6 steals and nearly a block per game throughout his career. A player who's 6'7" with incredible length and lateral quickness. A player who can guard positions 1 through 4 and make life miserable for opposing scorers. A player who's on a contract that pays him under $30 million per year in average annual value, which is considered extremely team-friendly in today's inflated market. A player who doesn't need plays run for him but can knock down open threes when defenses collapse on our stars. A player who embodies everything we need to complete this roster and transform us from pretenders into legitimate contenders. I'm talking about Herb Jones, and the possibility of him wearing purple and gold is becoming more realistic by the day. Now, I know some of you are already thinking about what we'd have to give up, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, let me explain why Herb Jones is exactly what this team needs and why acquiring him could be the move that defines our championship window. Jones isn't just a good defender, he's an elite, game-changing, opposing coach nightmares about him, level defender. He has the size to body up bigger wings. He has the quickness to stay in front of smaller guards. He has the instincts to read passing lanes and create turnovers. He has the discipline to avoid cheap fouls while maintaining physical pressure. And he has the versatility to switch across multiple positions in our defensive schemes. Imagine for a moment what our starting lineup would look like with Herb Jones in the mix. Picture Luka Doncic running the offense with his brilliant playmaking and scoring ability. Picture Austin Reeves continuing his emergence as a legitimate two-way threat. Picture LeBron James operating as a point forward, orchestrating our attack and picking his spots to be aggressive. Picture Anthony Davis anchoring our defense in the paint and dominating on the glass. Now picture Herb Jones as the missing piece, the defensive stopper who can take the opposing team's best perimeter player out of the game and allow everyone else to play more aggressively, knowing they have help behind them. That lineup would be absolutely terrifying for opponents to face. We'd have elite playmaking from multiple positions. We'd have scoring threats all over the floor. We'd have size and length across the board. We'd have the versatility to switch defensive assignments and adjust to different matchups. We'd have the perfect blend of veteran championship experience and hungry young talent. Most importantly, we'd have the defensive identity that's been missing from this roster, the ability to get crucial stops in crunch time and close out tight games with our defense rather than hoping our offense can outscore everybody. Let's talk specifics about what Jones would bring to our defensive schemes. J.J. Redick has been trying to implement a more aggressive, switching-heavy defense that can adapt to the modern NBA's emphasis on ball movement and three-point shooting. But to run that system effectively, you need defenders who can legitimately guard multiple positions without creating mismatches that opponents can exploit. Right now, we have too many players who are liabilities in switching situations, too many players who get targeted in the playoffs because teams know they can't stay in front of quicker guards or body up stronger forwards. Jones eliminates those weaknesses. He can switch on to point guards and stay in front of them. He can switch on to power forwards and hold his ground. He gives Redick the flexibility to be more creative defensively without worrying about creating exploitable matchups. Beyond the defensive impact, Jones fits our offensive system perfectly. He doesn't need the ball to be effective. He's comfortable playing off the ball, cutting to the basket, setting screens, and spotting up in the corners for open threes. His three-point percentage isn't elite, but it's respectable enough that defenses have to respect him and can't completely ignore him. That's crucial because the last thing we need is another player clogging the paint and making it harder for LeBron and AD to operate. Jones spaces the floor adequately while bringing all the defensive value that makes him so special. He's the ultimate role player, the kind of guy who makes winning plays that don't always show up in the stat sheet, but make all the difference in close games. Now let's address the elephant in the room. What would it cost to acquire Herb Jones? According to reports from multiple league insiders, the Pelicans are seeking at least one first-round pick for Jones. That's their baseline asking price, their starting point for negotiations. They might also want young talent or additional draft capital, depending on what other teams are offering. This is where Rob Pelinka has to make a difficult decision. We have one tradable first-round pick available, either our 2031 or 2032 selection, depending on how protections shake out. That's valuable currency. That's the kind of asset that could be used in multiple different trade scenarios for multiple different players. The question becomes, is Herb Jones worth that pick? Is he worth potentially limiting our flexibility to make other moves? Is he worth going all in on defense at the expense of other potential upgrades? In my opinion, the answer is an emphatic yes. Here's why. First, we're in win-now mode. LeBron James is 39 years old and playing at an incredible level, but we don't know how many more seasons we have of him at this level. We can't afford to be patient. We can't afford to hold on to picks hoping they turn into contributors 3 or 4 years from now. We need to maximize this window while we have LeBron and AD both healthy and productive. Second, Herb Jones addresses our single biggest weakness. He's not a luxury. He's not a nice-to-have piece. He's exactly what we need to compete for a championship. Third, his contract situation is ideal. He's under team control for multiple years at a reasonable salary, meaning this isn't just a rental situation. We'd be acquiring a long-term piece who could be part of our core for years to come. Some analysts have proposed specific trade packages that would work financially and make sense for both teams. One scenario that's been floated involves sending Gabe Vincent, Dalton Knecht, and that first-round pick to New Orleans in exchange for Herb Jones. Let me break down why that package makes sense from both perspectives. For the Lakers, we'd be moving Gabe Vincent, who's been solid but hasn't quite lived up to his contract and is somewhat redundant with our backcourt depth. We'd be including Dalton Knecht, our recent draft pick, who has shown flashes but is still raw and would benefit from more playing time than we can offer on a championship contender, and we'd be attaching that first-round pick as the sweetener that makes New Orleans seriously consider the deal. In return, we get Herb Jones, an immediate impact defender who solves our biggest problem and fits perfectly with our timeline. From New Orleans' perspective, they'd be getting a first-round pick to help with their rebuild. They'd be getting Dalton Knecht, a young prospect with upside who could develop into a valuable rotation player. They'd be getting Gabe Vincent as salary filler who they could potentially flip again or buy out. It's not a king's ransom, but for a team that's 3-20 and needs to accumulate assets, it's a package worth considering, especially when you factor in that Jones is entering the final year of his current deal before his extension kicks in, and there's always some risk involved in paying a player who's primarily valuable for his defense rather than his offensive production. Now, I've seen some Lakers fans on social media expressing concern about including Dalton Knecht in any trade package. I get it. He's a rookie. He's shown flashes of being a legitimate shooter. We drafted him for a reason. But here's the reality. Championship teams make tough decisions. Championship teams don't fall in love with potential when they have an opportunity to acquire proven production. Knecht might develop into a solid rotation player in a few years. Herb Jones is an all-defensive caliber player right now. We're not in the business of developing young players and hoping they pan out. We're in the business of winning championships while we have LeBron James and Anthony Davis in their primes. That means making aggressive moves, taking calculated risks, and prioritizing present value over future potential. There's also been discussion about whether the Lakers should pursue other defensive options instead of going all in on Jones. Some have mentioned other wings who might be available. Some have suggested we could address our defensive needs through smaller moves or buyout market additions. But here's the thing. Opportunities to acquire players of Herb Jones's caliber don't come around often. When a young elite defender on a team-friendly contract becomes available, you don't overthink it. You don't get cute trying to find a cheaper alternative. You pull the trigger and figure out the rest later. The difference between having Herb Jones and not having him could be the difference between losing in the second round and hoisting the Larry O'Brien Trophy. That's not hyperbole. That's the reality of how much impact a single player can have when they address your biggest weakness. Let me also address something that an anonymous NBA scout recently said about our current roster construction. Let's have that conversation right now in the comments. And listen, if you want to stay on top of every development in this story and every other Lakers update as we head toward the trade deadline, you absolutely need to subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the Lakers News Fan Report family. We're bringing you daily updates, breaking news as it happens, and the kind of in-depth analysis you won't find anywhere else. Don't be the last one to know when major moves happen. Be part of this community, and let's ride this season together all the way to Banner 18. Let's go, Lakers!